It's been a year to remember, not necessarily for the good, but it's been memorable nonetheless. And we know that everything won't change on that day, but it just feels like a new beginning and a little hope. So it's been a year filled with natural disasters and some not so natural. Disasters that have stretched our capacity for hope and faith and certainly causing us to question our faith in humanity. These are tenuous times, and it may feel new to us, but none of this is new to God. The Spirit of God has always been alive and moving in the times and the places that we find most despairing. The Christmas story takes place in one of those times, the time when people were feeling desperate, and yet God was beginning a new chapter, a new era of hope. Now, so far, the story that we've been reading through Advent of the birth of the Christ child has centered on one family, on Mary and Joseph, on Elizabeth and Zacharias and their baby John, with a few shepherds observing quietly this momentous event, a child is born. Now, Luke's gospel does not introduce us to any traveling wise men coming from the east following a star. He jumps right into the baby's first visit to Jerusalem. This next scene, this next movement in the story of Jesus' birth is about community. It's about connecting this individual family with a broader community of faith. We might call this story the blessing of the elders. For this young family, these parents bring their infant Jesus to the temple in Jerusalem to present him to the Lord. And they offer the sacrifice according to what is expected for a poor family to give, a pair of turtle doves or 2 young pigeons. Here in this place, in this moment, we meet Simeon, a just man, a devout man. For years, he's been waiting for this moment, for the consolation of Israel, for the hope of a better future. At some point, it seems, in his life, the Spirit revealed to him that he would not die before he had seen the Lord's Messiah. And when he sees this family, this child, he takes the baby up into his arms with joy and relief and says, "My Lord, now you are dismissing your servant in peace, for my eyes have seen your salvation. And you have prepared this in the presence of all peoples to be a revelation to the Gentiles and glory to your people Israel." He blesses the parents and he blesses the child. He has then some words of wisdom for Mary. For he says to her directly, "This child is destined for the failing and the rising of many. He'll be a sign that will be opposed. The inner thoughts of many will be revealed, and a sword will pierce your heart also." It's an affirmation that God is in fact with them. God is guiding their steps, and it's a word of caution that the path they are on is not going to be easy. Then we get to meet another wise elder, a prophet named Anna of the tribe of Asher. We're told she is of great age. She's been married for 7 years and lived the rest of her life as a widow, now 84. Living at the temple, worshiping, fasting, and praying night and day, caring for the people at the temple was her life's purpose. And when she walked in this day and saw this family, she too began to praise God, talking about this child to anyone who wanted to listen. This infant was introduced to the community of faith that would shape his childhood. Now, it takes a village to raise a child is actually an African proverb. And it's meant to suggest that an entire community of people is needed interacting with children for those children to grow and thrive in a safe and healthy environment. This story moves our focus from one nuclear family to a larger, broader family of faith. The family of faith that will mold this child as he grows in wisdom and strength. It reminds us that even the Christ child, even God with us, is blessed by all the unique individuals, the daily encounters, the joyful and the difficult experiences that combine to form our personalities, to mold our potential, and to set us on our life's path. We need the blessing of those who teach us, those who challenge us, and those who are there to pick us up when we fall or fail or just need a listening ear. Now, Rachel Naomi Remen is one of my favorite writers. She's a physician and a teacher and a counselor, having spent years as a patient herself with Crohn's disease. In her book, My Grandfather's Blessing, she writes about the many lessons she learned from her grandfather, who was a rabbi, a spiritual guide in a family full of doctors. And she writes about befriending life. She says, there is a hidden seed of greater wholeness in everyone, in everything. And we serve life best when we water it and befriend it. So in befriending life, we don't make things happen according to our design. We uncover something that is already happening in us and around us, and we create conditions that enable it. We bless the life around us far more than we realize. For many simple, ordinary things that we can do affect those around us in profound ways. An unexpected phone call, a willingness to listen generously, just a warm smile. Now, many of Dr. Remen's stories take place in a hospital setting, but they resonate with our everyday experiences of blessing others and being blessed in the process. Now, she shares one story, one experience that she had when she was a young medical intern. She writes, a distraught father rushed into the emergency room, holding his unconscious infant in his arms, calling out for help. The infant was diagnosed as having life-threatening dehydration, was experiencing heart arrhythmias. She describes the moment when she says, we had run out of time. The electrolytes and fluids pouring into the tiny veins would not be fast enough to reverse the chaotic electrical activity in the baby's heart. And the team turned to the pediatric defibrillator, 2 paddles attached to a machine capable of delivering an electric shock to the heart. The most senior resident stepped towards a table, placed the paddles, one behind the baby's back, the other almost completely covering the child's chest. And over the next few minutes, he shocked the baby 4 times without a response. The EKG was flat. The baby's heart had stopped. He flung the paddles on the floor. He quickly ordered epinephrine injected directly through the child's chest into its heart. And there was still no response. So he turned, nodded to the other 2 residents. It's time to talk to the parents. Without another word, the 3 of them left the treatment room. Now, I was too young a doctor and too inexperienced to know that after 4 attempts at defibrillation, no one comes back. So without thinking, I stood and I picked up the paddles from the floor. Just one more time, I said to the nurses. Placing the paddles as I had seen the senior resident do, I pressed the red button. As before, the tiny body lifted slightly from the table and fell back. And in the silence that followed, I heard one of the nurses draw in her breath. Look, she whispered. She pointed to the EKG. The flat line was now a classic tracing of a normal heartbeat pulsing steadily across the screen. And I let go of the paddles and I picked up the baby in my arms, and there was relief in the room that was indescribable. We crowded together, and all of us talking at once, and we all had tears in our eyes, and the door opened. And in the doorway stood a distraught woman. Just behind her was a man, his white face drawn. Dismayed, I realized the doctors must have given the baby parents the bad news. But suddenly the baby began to cry, and as the woman stumbled toward us, one of the nurses quickly took the IV bottles from their stand and began to rush the EKG machine. Halfway across the room, we met her and put her son back into her arms. Dr. Remen continues, befriending a single life is usually the task of a community over time, many of whom will never meet each other or even be aware of each other's existence. Medicine is often like that, and so is life. Often we do not get to see the outcome of our actions, but there are other times when by grace you may be allowed to directly participate in events that make a profound difference. This story struck me as especially meaningful this year as medical professionals, orderlies, hospital staff, chaplains, and volunteers are struggling under the immense weight of this virus, sometimes succeeding and sometimes failing to preserve life, but always blessing families with their relentless efforts to care and to serve their communities every day in the most difficult conditions. They feel the losses, and hopefully they know how deeply their efforts bless each person that they touch. The capacity to bless life is in everyone, in any line of work, at any age or circumstance that we find ourselves. Rachel Naomi Remen reminds us that the power of our blessing is not diminished by illness or age. On the contrary, our blessings become even more powerful as we grow older, for they have survived the buffeting of our experience. A blessing is not something that one person gives to another. A blessing is a moment of meeting, a certain kind of relationship in which both people involved remember and acknowledge their true nature and their worth, and strengthen what is whole in one another. You can actually bless those around you just by being yourself, your true, authentic self, and allowing them to see that they could be themselves as well and be loved. In our story, Simeon and the prophet Anna represent the many people who would shape and bless the early life of Jesus. Our faith proclaims that God is incarnate in the world. Emmanuel, God with us, in a child, in a human life, raised within and blessed by the nurturing love of a community. And the gift of blessing is now ours to give.